You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And we will be doing lots of politics this evening because we have as our guest Isaac Hayes, who is the Republican nominee in the 2nd Congressional District. He's taking on Congressman Jesse Jackson, who is now in his 16th year, so a longtime incumbent. Isaac Hayes grew up on the south side of Chicago, got a job at 13 at a local neighborhood store, and hasn't stopped working since. Keeps very busy, has an undergraduate degree from Illinois State University in information systems, right?
Yes.
Worked in the service, sales, mortgage industry, becoming assistant to the VP, the vice president, ABN AMRO Mortgage. Ordained in 2006 as a minister, worked full-time. He works full-time as a youth minister and ministry planner in the Apostolic Church of God in Hyde Park. Works with the Heat of the Street Ministry, lives in Park Forest with his wife, Latuna. Is fighting against school closing. He's fighting to help ex-offenders. He is running as a Republican he hopes to beat Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. in the 2nd Congressional District. Isaac, you've been running a lot on education.
Yes.
Is education a federal issue, and especially the issue of school vouchers and school choice, which you support, right?
I do support school vouchers. It is an issue when federal dollars are going to supplement the education of our young people. Roughly $100,000 is spent on our young person once they enter kindergarten through high school. We'll spend approximately $100,000 on them. And so I think we need to get a better return on our investment, and that's why I'm a proponent of parental school choice, which basically says the parent is in charge of their child's education. They can get a voucher to send their kids to a parochial school, charter school, private school, or even homeschool their kid and be reimbursed for their expenses.
So right now in the Chicago Public Schools, which is a portion of Chicago is in your district, right?
Yes.
Right now in the Chicago Public Schools, we spend about $15,000 per kid per year. That's the average expenditure in the Chicago Public Schools. Some maybe maybe a bit more for high school, a bit less for grade school, but that's the average. So taking that money, the $15,000, if you could give those to the parents of the kids in the public schools. Certainly in Chicago, figure out what it is in the other areas outside of Chicago. If it's $12,000, take $12,000. Take that bundle, that satchel of money, put it in a backpack, and strap the backpack on the kid. And if the kid decides, if a kid is currently going to the public school now, and the parents want to continue to send their kid to a public school, nothing changes. Kid goes into the public school, the money we're spending, $15,000, goes back to that public school.
Yes.
No change. But if the parents and the kid decide to attend a private school, whether it's a parochial school, whether it's a non-sectarian school, and they choose to attend that school, out goes the kid, out goes the backpack, out goes the cash and the voucher to that private school. Would you support that? I'd call that a fully funded school voucher program. All the funds, federal, state, and local funds that are being spent on that public school, the kids' education in the public school, parents get to take that and send it to the school of their choice. You sign on to that?
Absolutely, and here's the beauty of that. First of all, you create a market-based educational system because the schools that perform well, the parents will rush to send their kids there. There are charter schools with 300 or more parents on a waiting list waiting to get their kids into these schools. And so when you have competition, school choice proves that public schools get better when you have school choice. And so what I am promoting is allowing parents to determine where those dollars go. And the benefit is if you have some Catholic schools where the tuition is only $6,000 and we use your $15,000 estimate, then we have $9,000 that can go elsewhere where there may be more struggling schools.
Well, yes, so that $9,000 stays in the public school system. They've lost educating one child that they previously estimated would cost $15,000, but in this case only, would you say $6,000 goes out and $9,000 stays in, so the kids who remain in the public schools more money to spend on them, as you point out, to assist where perhaps the need is greatest.
Right, it's a win-win situation for the existing public schools and for our children, which is most important.
And we've had these programs for a while. We've had one in D.C., right?
Right.
We've had a Cleveland experiment, school vouchers still going on, right? In Milwaukee, perhaps other areas. So in your view, is it working in those areas? Did it work in D.C., Cleveland, Milwaukee?
Yeah, well, the Illinois Policy Institute...
You know, there's some people say it doesn't work. What do you say?
Well, there is no 100% success rate. Everyone would admit that. But if you look at the Illinois Policy Institute's report by Colin, it shows that downstate and suburban charter schools, yes, downstate and suburban charter schools, when you measure, are doing 62% better than existing public schools. So there is a marginal improvement when compared to existing public schools and the charter schools.
And the Heartland Institute cites similar studies.
Right.
Carolyn Hoxby is a professor, was in education, was at Harvard, I think now is at the Hoover Institution. She's studied this stuff extensively.
Right.
She finds a significant improvement in terms of, one, you get more competition, you got innovation from the private schools, and then in the area where the private schools are now getting vouchers and competing with the public schools, as you point out, the public schools, because of the competition, also perform better.
Yes.
So as you say, a win-win situation.
Win-win, yeah.
And yet teachers' unions are adamantly opposed to school vouchers, right?
There are some teachers' unions that
also, I mean, do you agree?
Opposed, yes.
Yeah, because they don't want the competition, right?
I'm not sure what they want, but my fight is for the children. I'm not interested in preserving jobs for anyone, but ensuring that we educate our children. Because if we fail to educate them, there will be no future job market in tomorrow.
But they say, the teachers' unions and their representatives and their leaders often say, before you do anything for private schools, you've got to improve the quality in public schools. They don't want any money drained from the public schools. They say vouchers would drain money from the public schools. What do you say?
Well, I said, what are we trying to protect? The interests of our young people or our own personal preferences. If we're looking to educate our kids and ensure that they receive a 21st century education and can compete with the children in China and Japan and South Korea who will be the future market for jobs, we need to make sure that we are educating them. I have family members who are educators. I have friends who are Chicago public school teachers, and I know they have a tough job, and we must continue to support those who do a good job, but those who are not performing up to the standards need to be removed from the classroom.
And you support charter schools as another avenue of school choice, of parental involvement and parental choice, right?
Yes.
And that's part of the public school system, but yet it has some of the same, many of the innovative, competitive features that you're talking about with school vouchers, right?
Yeah, the difference between the charter schools, they have less red tape, they have a little more freedom to try different creative approaches to educating our kids, and that's what we need in the classrooms for existing public schools, that principals have more free reign to do what they need to do and not the people downtown trying to run with a rule with an iron thumb over these principles.
And in Illinois, we've had a proposal that passed the Senate for school voucher, school choice, but didn't pass the State House, right?
Yes.
And that was a proposal that came from Reverend James Meeks, the state senator, Senator James Meeks as well.
Yes.
Right? That was his bill, and yet he couldn't get it. He got it through the Senate, but couldn't get it through the House.
Right. I think the important thing to note about state senator...
that was focusing on the bottom decile,
yes.
Bottom, what, 5 or 10%?
10%, yes.
At least the 10% of the schools that were performing least well in the state of Illinois.
Yes.
About 20,000 students would be eligible.
Yeah, 20 to 30,000 students.
Okay.
And I think the important thing to note about that is that Reverend Meeks is a Democrat, or at least he caucuses with the Democrats, and he has constantly been on this issue of education. And he's finally saw what we have seen for the longest, is that we need to try a different method. And for some reason in the black community, our legislators want to continue a system that failed us for the last 40 years. And so school choice is one of the new ideas and new approaches that can relieve us from the failures of the past.
And in the State House, a greater percentage of Republicans supported school voucher, school choice, this program to assist low-income kids. A greater percentage of Republicans supported that than Democrats, right?
Yes.
And yet, the general view is, and the voters in your district often vote predominantly, you say minorities vote, African-American voters vote predominantly for Democrats.
Yes, they do.
So should the minority community go back and talk to these legislators and ask if they're really representing the views of the minorities on school vouchers.
I can tell you, not just on school vouchers, but on a lot of issues. If you listen to any Black Talk radio station, you will hear nothing but complaining and displeasure with our elected officials on a myriad of issues. And so that's why it's important that you have candidates like myself who are bringing a new approach, a new alternative to decades-long problems. And so when we talk about the school voucher system, parents are beginning to embrace this idea. And I believe that with the leadership of Reverend Meeks, State Senator Reverend Meeks, we will begin to see the Black community get behind this effort.
All right. And Congressman Jesse Jackson, does he support school voucher, school choice?
I know he is in some limited way in support of charter schools. I have not heard him specifically come out in support of school vouchers and school choice.
On this program, he said he didn't. He was a while ago, but he didn't seem to support school voucher, school choice.
Well, I'm not surprised. You know, he's.
But you're saying now he seems to be supporting charter schools to some extent.
Yes, yeah, he was quoted in a local newspaper where I was promoting the Southland charter school that's been approved by the State Board of Education, and he was cited in there as also being in some support of it. And so I think he's just a politician who's trying to ride the bandwagon now that he sees he finally has an opponent who could replace him.
The economy and jobs, major issue in your district.
Absolutely.
Economic development, a crucial issue for the second congressional district, right?
Yes.
Where is that second congressional district? Give people an idea where it is.
Yeah, we're in the city of Chicago. It runs from Stony Island, beginning in Hyde Park to Lake Michigan, runs through South Chicago, South Shore, and so forth to 95th and Stony. At 95th and Stony, it goes over to 95th and Dan Ryan, and then it rides the western and eastern borders of I-57 to the Indiana state border with Illinois. The southern tip of that district is University Park.
Which is about how far south?
It is about 25, 30-minute drive south of Chicago.
Congressman Jackson, does he bring home the bacon?
He does a good job as a member of the Appropriations Committee bringing home funds. The problem is that the members of his district don't see those dollars, and so there's a question of what he's doing. When you have a city like Fort Heights with a 53% poverty rate, 9th Ward with a 30% unemployment rate, people are not seeing those dollars, and we need to know where they're going.
So what would you do if you were the congressman from the 2nd Congressional District to promote economic development in that district?
Well, I don't believe that the congressman is the know-all, be-all. I believe that the South Suburban Mayors Association, the City of Chicago aldermen should all come up with plans for their particular areas, and then it's my responsibility to invest in those plans that promote jobs, that promote small business investment. Some of the things that I'm touting is a freeze on the payroll tax for 1 year. I am promoting a middle-class tax cut of $2,500, which would give families an additional $200.
Freeze on the payroll tax just for the 2nd Congressional
for the entire country, but it would obviously
okay.
Promote that specifically in the stimulus bill. The president has 5 clean coal-fired plants in there. I want one of those to come to the Chicago Heights community. The Pullman district in the city of Chicago area was a manufacturing sector that I would like to utilize for green job creation for wind turbines and solar panels. And I'm also promoting a $30 million capital grant fund for aspiring entrepreneurs who may have good business plans but not able to get the capital they need to start those businesses.
Is President Obama doing a good job on the economy?
Well, I'll put it like this. The stimulus bill was passed in January or February of last year. There was a 7.6% unemployment rate, about 11 million unemployed Americans. A year and a half later, we have 9.9% unemployment and 15 million unemployed Americans. And so I will let the viewers determine whether or not that's a good job.
Well, what's your view?
Well, the numbers have gotten worse and not better.
All right, so you fault the president for not doing more to retard the rate of growth of unemployment and increase jobs.
I fault Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Congress for not having the leadership to put Americans back to work and instead focusing on cap and trade, health care, taking over financial markets.
You would have opposed the $800 billion Obama stimulus program?
I don't think it was effective, and I've been proven right had I not voted for it.
You wouldn't have voted for it?
Not in its current form.
You don't think it promoted jobs?
No.
Minimum wages. Some people say the minimum wage causes increased unemployment, especially among especially among those who are young and unskilled, because they have to compete with others who are more experienced, greater skills, and so they are knocked out of the job market by the minimum wage. What do you say to those folks?
Yeah, well,
you agree?
I want to go back to the stimulus bill and what I voted for and did to promote jobs. We know some of that money went to zip codes that don't exist. Some of it went to study cow gas, and I don't think those are ways you create jobs. In terms of the minimum wage, Thomas Sowell said that the zero sum of the minimum wage is that when you're unemployed or don't have a job, $0 is the minimum wage. And so I don't believe we should impose on employers, particularly those in my community, who may be trying to open up a burger shop or a hair salon, a minimum wage, because it disincentivizes their entry into the market.
Right. Thomas Sowell is an African-American economist.
Economist, yes.
Well respected, written a number of books, right?
Yes, absolutely.
In economics and other areas.
Yes, correct.
All right. But the minimum wage hits especially, would you say, minorities who are trying to get that first job, especially teenagers who may not have the skills that some of their competitors have.
Yeah,
you agree?
I think yes, and particularly when the unemployment rate for black teens is 50%.
Public corruption an issue in the 2nd Congressional District?
It is. We've had a three-peat of corruption with Mel Reynolds, Gus Savage, and now Mr. Jackson. Whether or not we will see what happens with the Blagojevich trial, but we know he is Senate candidate number 5 in the indictment. We know that
the Blagojevich indictment.
The Blagojevich
Let's
indictment.
be clear. There's nothing, Congressman Jesse Jackson has not been accused by the government of doing anything wrong, right?
At this point, he has not, but I find it quite strange that the day after he meets with the former governor, that he is arrested. And so there has to be...
He being Governor Blagojevich is arrested.
Governor Blagojevich meeting with Jesse Jackson Jr., and the day after the two of them meet, the governor is arrested. And so there's a cause-effect relationship.
Could this be coincidental? I mean, obviously, there's no showing that there's no showing of any accusation by the government that anything improper happened in that meeting, right?
Well, if you look, that he's currently being investigated by the Congressional Ethics Committee for using his congressional staff for campaign purposes, which is prohibited. If he's willing to do that violation, what's to make us think he's not willing to try to purchase a Senate seat for $1.5 million?
Is that your allegation, that you think he was trying to purchase a Senate seat?
I'm not making any allegations. I'm just saying the facts is that the governor gets arrested the day after the two of them meet, and that's quite coincidental.
All right, but you're not specifically accusing Congressman Jesse Jackson of doing anything improper or illegal?
Well, I think time will tell, and we'll see as the trial begins. We know that he's been subpoenaed by the governor to testify at the trial, and hopefully the truth will come out then.
What the governor's contending, that would be to show that nothing bad happened, right? He wouldn't be subpoenaed.
Or it could be he's telling his people to step up, or is everybody's going to go down with the sinking ship?
Well, but his strategy would be to bring in Congressman Jesse Jackson saying nothing improper was discussed during that meeting. That would be the governor's strategy, don't you think?
No, I think it's an intimidation tactic.
How does it work in terms of the trial?
Because if they don't get him off, he's saying, I won't go down alone. I believe he's sending a warning to everyone who was involved in this process that if you don't get me out of this, I'm taking everybody else down with me.
Well, he was trying to subpoena President Obama. Didn't succeed, right? The judge said, at least certainly not now, right?
Yeah.
But don't you think the same thing? Blagojevich is trying to say Obama, any discussions that had, Obama's not going to say anything. If he did testify, I assume he's not going to say, or what we know of so far is that there was nothing untoward happening in those conversations, right? You see the strategy?
I think the facts are yet to be revealed, and I wait to see what happens in the trial.
Healthcare, you would have opposed to the Obama healthcare program, right?
I liked portability. I liked the idea of no denial due to pre-existing conditions and no rescission. Those are provisions I would have supported.
No rescission
of policies. While you have, if you're already an existing policy holder and they find out that you had a pre-existing condition, they can then pull the policy away.
But that said, you would have gone for some other things, but you wouldn't have gone for, what, the $1 trillion Obamacare program?
I believe
too massive, too many changes.
Yeah, we should have had longer debate. We should have been able to include tort reform, health savings accounts, which were eliminated, not cutting $500 million from Medicare. So there are a lot of things that we could have done besides what we've been given, which is the next step toward government-run health care.
Foreign policy, was it a mistake to go into Iraq?
Absolutely not. Saddam Hussein at that time was a perceived threat. This was right after 9/11. We had Resolution 1441, and he didn't comply with that, and so we had all legal and ethical ground to go into Iraq.
Even though we didn't find any weapons of mass destruction?
Well, the international community believed that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. He boasted that he did, and after 9/11, which is a different world that we live in, we cannot take those chances.
If we knew that there weren't weapons of mass destruction, if you knew that, and if you were in Congress, would you have still voted to support giving the president the authority to take military action in Iraq, if you knew that there were no weapons of mass destruction?
I think if Republicans and Democrats knew, who voted, both of them bipartisanly, in support of the president's invasion of Iraq, I would not have voted if we didn't have the evidence that supported the claim and the reason for why we went into Iraq, which is weapons of mass destruction.
So if you had no evidence of that, you would then not have supported going into Iraq?
I don't think either party would have voted for that.
Neither the Democrats or Republicans who voted
right.
for that. Okay. Afghanistan, you support the surge that Barack Obama put forward?
I do. I support the surge of roughly 30,000 additional troops on the ground.
You think that's winnable in a year? Afghanistan War?
Afghanistan is tough. You have the Karzai government, which is very fragile. You have a resurgent Taliban. You have citizens of that country who are afraid to support us because they know we've announced that we're pulling out. And so if you know you're going to be stuck with the Taliban after America pulls out, why would you even try to work toward some type of democratic government?
Right. So you wouldn't have announced, as President Obama did, that he would start troop withdrawal in July of next year?
Absolutely not.
In that sense, you're critical of him?
Yeah, it's like a prisoner who's waiting to get out of jail. You post the date you're getting out and you count down, and that's what the Taliban are doing, counting down, and they're now fighting with the Mujahideen to see who's going to be in power once we pull out.
What should we do with Iran? Should the United States encourage Israel to take out the burgeoning nuclear military capability of Iran?
Well, I think we need to do everything we can to weaken the Islamic Republican Guard, whether that's not doing business with countries that do business with Iran, whether that's some type of internal uprising by supporting the Green Revolution to let them take their country back, or if all else fails, we have to keep military action on the table.
Including taking out the military capability?
Including taking out the military capability.
By Israel or the United States?
Well, we are both partners in that, and I'm sure that's something the Joint Chiefs of Staff would come up with and decide on who should do that and how that should be done.
And you support, and before that, a blockade of gasoline into Iran?
Well, one of the things I've considered it, but part of the problem is that we don't want to punish the citizens of Iran. We want to directly target the Republican Guard, and if we can target them and weaken their power and weaken their ability to have financial comfortability, I think we can do it if it doesn't impact the people themselves.
All right, but that's proposed legislation. I think Congressman Mark Kirk is a sponsor of that legislation. You're still hesitant on that because it imposes high costs on the individuals, the people of Iran?
The people themselves, and we don't want to turn them against us. If you lose the people, you lose the whole entire push to have regime change.
You're an ordained minister, right?
Yes.
Gays, guns, God, and abortion. Would you vote to ban all abortions if you could, except in the instances where the life of the mother was at stake?
I believe fully that life is sacred, and we should do everything in our power to protect the life of unborn Americans.
Does that mean you would ban all abortions?
I would vote to end abortion at demand.
But if the life of the mother was at stake, you would allow that exception for that abortion?
Right now, I think we just need to stop abortion at demand. We can deal with medical emergencies or rape and incest at a later day.
Well, does that mean if the life of the mother was at stake, you would allow that abortion to go ahead?
Well, my position is right now, that's not our push. We need to focus on the 95% of abortions that are not rape and incest and not the life of the mother. That's what I want to reduce.
Those clearly you would not allow?
Those clearly, correct.
And then you would figure out the wording in terms of those 5% differently. No on same-sex marriage?
No, correct.
Civil unions?
No, I believe the reason we reward families and married couples who are men and women is because they create families, they ensure that future Americans will remain in this country, and they provide some sense of stability for our communities.
Those views that you have on abortion and same-sex marriage, would you say they're shared by the great majority of the people in the 2nd Congressional District?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Including in the African-American community?
Highly in the African-American community. We saw in California
Congressman Jesse Jackson takes a different view. He would be certainly,
yes,
if not completely, almost completely pro-choice, right?
Yes, he is.
And would he favor same-sex marriage?
And he favors same-sex marriage, and that's why previous supporters of his have switched to my side, because I've clearly stated what I'm for, and they agree with those positions.
You agree that should there be a right, is there a right to possess a handgun in the home, and should there be number one, is there a constitutional right, as the Supreme Court seemed to hold in the case coming out of the District of Columbia?
Yeah, I believe the Second Amendment is our constitutional right to bear arms, and I believe we should be able to protect our families. We saw...
Which means the right to possess a handgun in the home?
Right to possess a handgun in the home.
Which in Chicago you can't?
Right now you cannot, yes.
Okay.
And I think that's a huge indifference. If we look at incidents over the past month, those people who have been able to protect their lives from invaders were Chicago police officers who were armed. If that's not evidence enough to remove these frivolous armbands, then what else will be?
All right. And prayer in schools, would you allow it?
Well, that's a tricky one. I believe that you should be able to pray privately, but if you open it up, you have to allow every other ethnicity and even the Church of Satan children to come in and pray. And I don't think we want to go that far. But if you want to have a private moment of prayer, I think that should be allowed.
Congressman Davis is in the 7th Congressional District. Has he done a good job with his ex-offender legislation?
Well, I think it's
jobs
good.
For
The second chance. One of the things which is a group called Common Link Alliance, and they help ex-offenders, particularly those who have been in there for an extended period of time, become entrepreneurs. So they give them a business book. They have an extensive course of training to become entrepreneurs, because the reality is it's difficult for ex-offenders to find jobs. And so those are the type of programs I support.
And you're running on that when you run for Congress?
Absolutely, yes.
And you're running on parental choice?
It's parental school choice, yes.
Okay. And you're running on reform?
Yes. We need leadership.
Honesty in government?
On honesty in government.
You're running on promotion of jobs, right?
Correct.
Small business?
Small businesses.
Anything else? We've covered a number of issues.
Well,
what's key to your campaign?
Safe neighborhoods, but that includes the removal of the handgun bans, and also it includes a police surge of at least 100 additional officers, particularly in Chicago. So I support more investment in local law enforcement so we can put more police officers on the streets.
We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, Isaac Hayes, who's the Republican nominee for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District. He is taking on Congressman Jesse Jackson, Jr., who is in his 16th year of incumbency. He's got his work cut out for him. We're taping this show, we should say, on May 23rd, and that election is coming up in a while, November 2nd. Yeah. All right. Let me go through a number of quick issues in the remaining time. Card check, which would end its opponents say would end the secret ballot for union votes. Whether you should establish a union, would you favor card check?
It's an intimidation and invasion of privacy legislation.
Cap and trade, is that cap and tax?
Raise energy prices on families.
You oppose?
I oppose.
Use waterboarding to interrogate captured terrorists?
I believe we should have all options open for the high-value detainees like Sheikh Mohammed.
Including waterboarding?
Anything that's necessary to keep America safe.
Rand Paul, who just became the nominee for the Senate out of Kentucky, Republican nominee, is his view on the 1964 Civil Rights Act, is that problematic for you?
Well, I would like to sit down and get his clear view. I know Republicans...
He says he would have supported that act to the extent it prevented discrimination on the basis of race with respect to government-run facilities. But he thought on the private sector, being a libertarian, even though he abhors discrimination, he said he would not have supported that aspect of the Civil Rights Act.
Well, I do support it. I believe, regardless of race and color, you should not be barred from any public institution.
Or private property.
Or private
if
property.
You've got a store,
yes.
Restaurant, so you differ with Rand Paul on
I
that.
differ with him.
But you would still support him as running for governor, running for Senate in Kentucky?
My focus is on Illinois and its 2nd Congressional District.
I think he since said he supports the Civil Rights Act, the 1964 Civil Rights Act. He just is concerned about that particular aspect.